Hey, what's up?
Okay, everyone. Thank you for coming. You will find that you're all muted now. You can no longer speak. That's because we're going to start in just a minute. But thank you, everyone, for coming. This is like way more than last time, I think. But yeah, gather around here where the kind of chairs are, and you can stand on the chairs and watch. You can't sit, but you can stand on the chairs. Please try not to move too much during the presentation to not be too distracting to the speaker, but other than that, feel free to enjoy. We also have like a live stream going on right there. You can look back and say hello. So to everyone who's on the live stream, you can later join our like Telegram group to join future events and yeah, so you can be with us in 3D and not just 2D. So that's just search for VR Bitcoin in Telegram. That's the name of the group, no spaces. Yeah, we will allow questions at the end, so don't worry about that. When we finish up, we're going to move to VR chat, which is another app that we tried the previous time. It's a lot of fun, but we'll start here. And just so you know, if you want to let the presenter know how you feel about the presentation, you have these emojis that you can show, so you can say, oh, this is amazing, or this is terrible. So if you can quickly show us a heart if you can see the presentation, and a sad emoji if you can't see the presentation. Okay, that's good. Everyone's happy. That's great. One note on privacy, just so you know, this is being recorded and this is also being streamed. So everything you say here is considered public. You know, feel free to use pseudonyms next time, but just so you know, everything you say here is public, so keep that in mind. And yeah, I think we're ready to start. So today our speaker is Adam Gibson, also known as Waxwing, and he's known as, you know, a very big Bitcoin privacy advocate. He's the maintainer and developer behind Joy Market, and also, you know, has a great blog actually that I think you should all visit that has all things privacy and Bitcoin that you should definitely read. And he's going to talk to us about PayJoin today, and that's it. Adam, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully you can all hear me. So just bear in mind that today is an experiment, and it's not too deadly serious, okay? So, but we're going to do our best. I'll try and take less than about 20, 25 minutes. And at the end of that time, as Udi just said, we can have some questions. So what's going on here? Well, begun the privacy wars have. Just sort of sprang into my mind because I remember thinking this maybe 2-3 months ago. It really seems like in recent times there's been a heating up of stories about people, first of all, people wanting privacy, more and more privacy software in Bitcoin, but also stories about people having problems with privacy in Bitcoin, people like getting their payments blocked and stuff like that. So I get this sense, I don't know if you get it too, that maybe what's happening around about now is kind of similar to what was happening maybe 4 years ago in Bitcoin around scalability, and then it also came to a head over a period of a couple of years. Maybe totally wrong, but I get the impression that we could be heading into sort of turbulent waters in the whole area of privacy with Bitcoin. So before I go on and show you like the main point of the talk, which is to give you an overview of PayJoin, and just to say this is not a technical talk, okay? It's only sort of very base level technical. It's not going to go into protocol details. So if you're not a coder, this is still something that you can follow, I hope, as long as you understand some basic Bitcoin stuff. But before I go into what PayJoin is and all that stuff, let's think a bit about the context. So privacy wars, the issue of what privacy is and what's important. So is Bitcoin anonymous? Well, we kind of learned that Bitcoin is definitely not anonymous over the first few years of its existence. You know, there's a concept of pseudonymity, which it has. Academics came along and said, look, this is absolutely crappy from a point of view of privacy. I can show you all these things that attackers can do, analysts can do to strip away the privacy you have from just this basic pseudonymity feature. So people realized there was a problem pretty early on, and even by 2012 and 2013, there were researchers talking about what techniques could we use to improve it, how far can we go to actually get private payments on a system like Bitcoin. And in a way, that conversation has just been going on and on and on for several years, because on the one hand, you have a direction where people, most recently it's championed by Wasabi and Samurai. They have this direction of, well, we can take what Bitcoin offers us, CoinJoin specifically, but not only CoinJoin, and we can really ramp it up, and we can really use sophisticated tooling to sort of recapture that privacy that we lose from the transparent nature of the Bitcoin blockchain. Because just reflect for a moment and think, it's kind of a funny fact that Bitcoin doesn't use any kind of encryption at all. Something that the general public will get very confused about. Okay, Udi?
I think your megaphone might be off.
Okay, let me check. It is. I don't know. Okay, can you hear me? Well, you obviously... put heart if you can hear me better now. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Did you? Oh, well, I'll just... That's annoying. I thought I had it on. So I'll just continue. Well, this is what we expect. All right, so what was I saying? Yes, so some people have been trying to have tools that make Bitcoin privacy within the context of this very transparent blockchain that has no encryption. They've been making tools based around CoinJoin, but also some other things to make it so that at least it's better. And then there's and they go to quite an extreme, like Wasabi has this concept of zero link, and they have a whole set of protocols. Is everything okay? Is everything okay? That's okay. Everything's okay. This is very strange. But that's been one angle of attack, and there's been this other angle of attack, which has been like, oh, well, this whole Bitcoin privacy thing just doesn't work. So let's go without coins, right? We've got Monero, now we've got Zcash. We've got very sophisticated technology that does a lot more than just obfuscate, let's say, ownership of individual coins, which tries to either, for example, blind the amount so we can't tell how much is being paid, or it might totally blind the whole transaction graph as Zcash tries to do. So there's been these two directions people have gone in. And before I get into what PayJoin is, which is kind of on one side of that to some extent, I want to sort of offer a high level view as I see it. It's only my perspective, is that the problem is that on the one hand, the extreme of going down the sort of zero link route is that'll never completely work. Okay, no matter how careful you are with your UTXOs, there'll always be metadata. There'll always be things called active attacks where people pay merchants deliberately to try to make things happen. There'll always be various kinds of wallet clustering, all kinds of things, timing attacks, amount correlation attacks. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's great, but it's a bit limited. At the other extreme, we use super high-end cryptography, and we even just ditch Bitcoin entirely, and we just say we're going to make this new kind of system. And the problem with that is it makes other trade-offs. Especially it makes a trade-off about the most fundamental feature of what a blockchain is. Because think about it. What is a blockchain? Really? A blockchain is something where you're solving a double spend problem specifically by making everyone know everything, right? Everyone knows where the coins are in the pseudonyms, not the people, but they know where the coins are in the pseudonyms at all time. And if you violate that principle, okay, we have a bit of a problem. We saw that very concretely in Zcash in 2018, 2019, where they actually had a bug and nobody knew there was a bug and nobody knows if inflation was created or not. So they've kind of violated that core principle of what a blockchain is. So we have this massive tension, and this is why I think the privacy wars have begun between, are we going to get systems where we're going to sort of go a little bit away from that complete everyone knows everything position, but on the other hand have really good privacy, or are we going to stick with the perfect everyone knows everything situation, but the privacy, we're going to have to work with it. And I think ultimately the way you cut this Gordian knot, the way you solve this intractable problem is probably mostly second layers, okay? So it means Lightning, it means principally Lightning, but it might mean other things too. And in this context, the last thing I want to say is And what about the base layer privacy? Even if you make second layer, you still kind of need to think about the base layer. And so I do think that CoinJoin is going to continue to be important, but we'll see how it evolves, right? So one of the ideas about this was PayJoin. So let's go into that a little bit. So there's going to be a lot of text here, but I don't want you to try and read it. Okay, it's only little sections I'm going to excerpt and show you. So the first thing I want to show you is this. Oops. Yeah, this is not easy. This is not easy to get exactly right. There we go. No, it doesn't want to. Yeah, okay. Let me try that again. I'm just trying to show you a Bitcoin transaction here. Okay, this is a Bitcoin transaction. I know you can't read it very well. It's a bit blurred. Don't worry about that. It's a Bitcoin transaction. I'm trying to get into your mind the idea of CoinJoin. What is CoinJoin today? It's lots of equal sized outputs. If you can read it, which you probably can't, you'll see. Oh, sorry. Let me use my. If you can read it, you'll see lots of equal sized outputs on the output. And why do we have equal sized outputs in CoinJoins? Because we want to make it so that it isn't really easy to figure out, like this output here, which set of inputs on that side did it come from? Not only is it not obvious, but it's really impossible to tell. And the reason it's impossible to tell is because you can't use basic arithmetic to add up amounts here and find that you get to this one. Because even if you do, there's several other outputs of the same amount. So that's why we have always traditionally used equal sized outputs in CoinJoins going all the way back to 2013. The first ones were like Dark Wallet and Shared Coin with blockchain.info. Actually, that's a whole other story. Let's just say Dark Wallet. They used equal sized outputs. Join Market did the same. Then Wasabi and Samurai did the same. Okay, so basically, equal sized output CoinJoins make a lot of sense from one point of view, which is they give a good obfuscation of who owns, let's say, that address. And there's an anonymity set. You can figure out how many people have an equal sized output there, and you can say that's the anonymity set. If you like, it's a complicated story, but you can say that. But the problem with this is, I mean, it's great. It does a very good job, but it has this problem that it's very obvious, okay? Because this structure of transaction, we have a lot of equal sized outputs, is very distinct on the blockchain. And that's why I was mentioning at the start of this talk, lots of flagging of transactions. There are blockchain analysis companies looking at this. Maybe they can analyze this transaction in a sophisticated way. Maybe they can't. Well, what's obviously clear is that they can look at this transaction and flag it and say that is a mix. That is a mixing event. All right. So whatever happens, no matter how smart we are, including having, for example, some of these kinds of transactions have change outputs and some of them don't. But in any case, they are very much flaggable. Now, so the question I want to pose to you is, how do you solve that problem? How do you do coin joins which obfuscate who owns what coins, but you don't make it easy to flag? Yes.
Sorry for stopping you. It seems that the megaphone works best when you hold the microphone. This physical thing,
right.
If you can do that.
Okay. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Some people can't hear.
If it works. I mean, when you face away from the mic, they can't hear you. So I guess.
When I face away, I got it.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me. I'm sorry. I have a bit of a problem with the index controllers. The grip is. Oh God. Okay, that's going to be awkward. What I'll do is I'll stand here and I'll try and talk just here. Is it okay here? Yeah. It's best here, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I see a lot of positives for that. Thank you. I'll stand here when I talk and I'll just turn around to move it. So this is what we expected to happen. We're doing our best. All right. Oops. Always do it one too many. Oh, damn it. That's really annoying. Just there, and then it started to move. Okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. Now, so how do we solve this problem? We want to hide in a bigger crowd. Instead of having a small anonymity set, we want to have a big anonymity set. Or we want to even kind of blow up the concept of anonymity set because we just don't want anything to be distinguishable, but that's a bit of a high goal. So anyway, the idea would be, well, what if we could do a coin join but have it look like a payment? We want it to look same as ordinary payments. So the question becomes, what does an ordinary payment look like? Well, the most distinguishing feature of ordinary payments, generally speaking, is that they have two outputs. They have one output which is a payment, and the other output which is a change output that goes back to the starting wallet. You can obviously change that, but generally that's true. Now, in terms of inputs, payment transactions have varying numbers of inputs, but usually only a few, 1, 2, 3, usually. So if you can see the bottom of this screen here, I need to get my, there we go. See the bottom of the screen here. If we imagine having a coin join which had two outputs, suppose Alice and Bob want to coin join, just two people, then they might want to make equal sized outputs to satisfy the property we're talking about there. But if they make this kind of coin join, just 0.05 in, 0.05 out, 0.05 in, 0.05, that's terrible. That doesn't look anything like a payment. Pretty obviously, most payments will not have an exactly equal sized payment output and change output. That's kind of crap, right? So we want something better than that. So we might, hang on, there we go. Problem there. Oops, there it goes again. No. It seems to get like 3 or 4 and then stop. This was working before. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. This is working fine, all right. Yeah, I think this is the second one. Yeah, this is the second one. Now, a second idea might be, well, let's make. Hang on, what's going on here? Yeah, so in this case, we can see that Alice and Bob have different output amounts. So they're still coin joining, but this is kind of no good at all anyway, because even if you ignore the fact that those two outputs have different amounts, so, you know, Alice and Bob, well, let's not worry about that. But the main point I want to make with this example is that if that says 0.05, well, that's equal to 0.04 plus 0.01. And if that's 0.06, that's equal to 0.03 plus 0.03. And the thing is, if you think about it, an ordinary payment that you just make with random amounts, that will never happen. It will just never happen. Maybe 1 in a million times, yeah? That the amounts will add up in subsets like that. So that's a very special flag. And anybody who's a blockchain analyst could look at that and say, that's clearly a coin join. And so if you think about it, you realize after a while that the reason there's an issue here is because Bob is paying himself and Alice is paying herself, it inevitably ends up being the case that there's a way to sort of split the inputs to make them equal to the amount in the output. You know what I mean? Split the whole transaction into effectively 2 transactions, where Bob is paying Bob 0.06 and Alice is paying Alice 0.05. And it doesn't matter how clever you get with lots of inputs and lots of outputs, that will always be the case, because intrinsically it's not actually a transfer of funds between different parties. So this line of thinking leads to the basic. This one is not interesting. Here I'm just showing, even if you get more complicated, the same thing happens anyway. That's all right. Oh, stop! I can't stop it. There we go. So this line of thinking leads to the basic idea of PayJoin, which is, okay, it might be difficult to arrange it, but if we can make it so that when you do a payment, you also do a coin join, that will break all of these problems. Okay, so the core concept of PayJoin in a sentence is that when you pay someone, the receiver does a coin join with you as the sender. That's the core concept of PayJoin. So what are the advantages? But the most obvious one, and the one that's really worth focusing on, is hiding the payment amount, I think. Yeah, hiding the payment amount. So hiding the payment amount. So I think probably this is the example you probably most want to focus on as the outcome of this talk. If you haven't seen this before, think about this now. Suppose that Alice is going to pay Bob 0.1 bitcoins, right? 0.1 bitcoins. In a normal payment, that would show up as 0.1 BTC as one output, and whatever her change is the second output. But in a PayJoin, the idea is that Bob contributes one of the inputs. Which one? I can't quite see. 0.05. That one, yeah. A 0.08. Yeah, so Bob contributes the 0.08. Can you all see that? Yeah, 0.08 Bitcoin there. Yeah. And he gets back in the transaction as an output 0.18. Now, usually you need change, right? But it doesn't really kind of work like that here, does it? Because what's going on is that Alice has contributed the other two UTXOs, the 0.05 and the 0.09. Now she's only getting back 0.04, which means net she has lost 0.1, right? So she's made a payment of 0.1. So there isn't really so much a concept of change unless, well, I suppose it's correct to say that this is Alice's change in the payment, 0.04. That is correct, yeah. But Bob's in this weird situation where he's used one UTXO and got one back, and it will always be like that, although in theory he could contribute more. Okay, now this is really kind of weird when you first see it. I remember the first time I did like a mainnet example transaction of this, I showed it to people, I think on Mastodon, and I got a couple of people who were like really expert in Bitcoin, and I asked them, well, I asked the public, but these two people answered. I asked, what's the payment amount in this transaction? And they both got it wrong, right? And only after several hints did one of them eventually figure out what was happening, yeah? So it does actually make it really unobvious what's happening. First of all, the natural thing to assume is that one person is producing three inputs and making an output payment. And then the question the blockchain analyst is usually trying to answer is what's the payment amount and what's the change amount? And here they're very likely to conclude that 0.18 is the payment amount and 0.04 is the change amount. Now, why is that? If you've never seen this before, you might want to think about that question. If you were a blockchain analyst and you were looking at this transaction and you thought it was just an ordinary payment, why would you probably conclude it was a 0.18 payment? So if you figured it out, well done. So the answer is because if it was a 0.04 payment, usually, not always, but usually you would not consume all of this stuff on the left. Why would you, right? Because 0.04 is less than 0.05. Is also less than 0.09 and is also less than the other one. So usually this would be a bit weird as a payment if 0.04 was the payment amount, but I do want to caution you that wallet selection algorithms are very complicated. Anyway, one thing you certainly would not conclude is that the payment amount is 0.1 Bitcoin, but surprisingly it is, right? So this has a property that we could call steganographic. It looks like an ordinary payment. It is a payment, but it is not a payment of the amount that you think, and also it is not using UTXOs all from one wallet as you would expect it to. So for those reasons, this idea of PayJoin, at least generally speaking, we could say it's a pretty powerful idea to improve privacy by creating coin joins that don't look like coin joins, but look like ordinary Bitcoin transactions, and leave the blockchain analyst in an absolutely impossible situation. Because suppose 5, 10, 15% of transactions on the chain look like this. How does the blockchain analyst know which ones are PayJoins and which ones are in fact ordinary payments? And as usual, I can't control this. Before I go on to just, you can maybe just quickly look at that image if you want. But before I go on to that, I want to state the hopefully obvious. This is not some kind of panacea or some kind of incredible breakthrough. I mean, the general idea of PayJoin, I'm sure, occurred to many, many people over the years. And the reason that in the early years we gravitated towards equal output coin joins is because they look like a more practical solution, a more practical way of achieving the goal. First of all, you could get lots of people together. And second of all, the issue with doing PayJoins is that you somehow have to interact with the receiver of your payment. Now, if we want to be positive about it, we could say, well, imagine this gets integrated into BTC Pay server, and there's a protocol which is pretty easy for your wallet to talk to BTC Pay server. And maybe lots of merchants will be able to do this with you and make your payments look like ordinary payments, but actually be coin joins with your merchant, okay? So maybe it will happen, and I hope it will, but let's not be too starry-eyed, okay? The fact that the payer has to interact with the payee is clearly a more difficult case than the case where the payee just posts an address or has an address in their software that you can just get, and then you make the payment, right? So it's more difficult. On the other hand, bear in mind, Lightning is also interactive. Okay, I'm nearly towards the end now. I just want to maybe show you this image, which is from, it doesn't show up here. I want to credit 6102 Bitcoin, who's been doing some great work recently. And this is an example of his infographic, or part of one of his infographics. And it illustrates the reality. I keep pointing with this when you can't see that. Hang on. No, I can't pick this up anymore. Never mind. Okay, I'll just describe it. On the left, CoinJoin, as the old style CoinJoin, has equal size. Maybe you can't read these. They're 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. So you have 3 participants there, for example, and they're just kind of mixing their outputs. CoinSwap we're not going to discuss here, but it's an example of something where you actually have more than one transaction in the protocol. So it's like atomic swap you may have heard of, or you might have heard of how that's used in Lightning. So the idea here is that one person gets paid only on condition that they make the payment in a separate transaction via some kind of lock. So that's a very powerful technique, but if anything, it's even less practically achievable than something like PayJoin. So far we haven't really seen this on main chain at all. We obviously do see it as part of the Lightning Network off-chain. Problem with main chain is you have to wait blocks, so it makes practicality issues. PayJoin is like this, and it's very simple. It's generally, we consider it as a two-party thing, although you could imagine a more than two-party. That's kind of weird, but possible. Because payments are usually one person to another, one party to another. So here, what actually happens in PayJoin is like this. The red goes to the red. So 0.3 goes to 0.35, so that person's receiving a payment. 0.1 goes to 0.05, so that person's making a payment. And notice on the left of the graph, it says reality. And if I just manage to get this right for once, if I'm really slow, it works better. Yeah, so there we go. So the heuristic is what 6102 Bitcoin was trying to illustrate here is how a blockchain analyst might look at something as opposed to how it actually is in real life. So a blockchain analyst, probably simplest in the CoinSwap case, he thinks that the first transaction is a self-payment, and he thinks that the second transaction is a self-payment, whereas actually there was a transfer between two parties. And similarly with a PayJoin, the blockchain analyst will probably conclude that there was a payment of 0.35 Bitcoins from the owner of both of the two inputs with a 0.05 change. And the blockchain analyst will be totally wrong in that regard. Now, of course, what blockchain analyst thinks on the far left with the main ordinary CoinJoin, I personally think it's best to just say mix. They just look at that and say mix. They don't really know who owns what, though. Okay, so that's like a really high-level overview. I'm not talking about protocols. There is a whole analysis. You might have heard the phrase pay to endpoint. Pay to endpoint is about this whole question of if we do this, how do we make it so the merchant and the payer and the consumer can talk to each other and actually arrange to create the transaction? So there's several ideas about that, and you should bear in mind as a practical fact that today we have in Join Market this function. Two Join Market wallets can pay join to each other. We have in Samurai, I believe it's called Stowaway, which is the same thing. And you can imagine there what happened is that two mobile wallets are showing QR codes to each other in a couple of rounds. I don't know if it's 3, 4, 2, whatever. But you show QR codes to each other and you basically arrange the transaction between yourselves. So you can see from those examples that it's limited today, very limited in terms of how much people can use it. But maybe in future, it may or may not become a heavily used protocol. Finally, I'm not going to go into this because it's just an interesting side effect. If a merchant does multiple pay joins, there's an interesting feature. Look at the bolded numbers in these two cases. In the first example, Alice pays Bob 0.1 for a widget. So Bob's UTXO goes from 0.08 to 0.18. And then in the second transaction, he might take that 0.18 UTC and then he might sell a budget widget, a discount widget for 0.05. And now that single 0.18 has become 0.23. So what's happening here is instead of the merchant accumulating more and more UTXOs with each payment, he could actually be snowballing a single UTXO into a larger and larger size. It's an interesting feature in terms of wallet UTXO management. There's a lot to talk about there, but I won't go into it because it's kind of technical. And I think, yeah, so I'm basically finished there. That's the end of my talk. Thank you. Udi, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam. I think Adam is pretty much a natural in virtual reality presentations, even when things are confusing, like how the mic is going, he's doing it great. So that's awesome. And now we're going to open this for questions. So you should be seeing a raise hand button in the bottom right of your screen. If you have a question, you can go ahead and ask. Let's see. So Brad has a question. Go ahead, Brad.
So what are the chances, can you hear me? Yeah. What are the chances that this will be easy to use in a mainstream wallet, like a Bread wallet or something like that?
Well, I couldn't comment on something like Bread Wallet. I mean, I can say that Samurai, I'd like to have more up-to-date information. I tried it out myself about a year ago, and it was really janky for me and several other people in the London meetup. We couldn't get it to work. But I think there are some people using it in Samurai today. I'm not sure. In terms of like how people might actually use it in real life, I think person to person, wallet to wallet, yeah, maybe. But I'm also really interested in like merchants, so maybe BTC Pay server might be able to get this up and running. That might be a plausible angle.
Thank you. Next question from Parallel Police. Parallel Police, can you hear us?
Is this person? I don't think.
Okay, next question to Zender.
Okay, so as we know, Bitcoin is a system of incentives, but in this model, I can see that are more inputs than in a normal transaction. So how can we make this incentive for the merchant? Like, do you see a system where this could cost the same price as a normal transaction in the future?
Yeah, so actually this is a really confusing situation. I remember thinking about this quite a lot. The first observation I want you to make is from specifically this thing that I showed at the end, yeah? Imagine you're a merchant who doesn't use this and you receive payments for 1,000 items today. You're going to receive 1,000 new UTXOs. Whereas in this system, if every one of those was a PayJoin, you would not receive 1,000 new UTXOs. In fact, you would receive 0 new UTXOs. Because every time there was a payment, you would contribute a UTXO, which get destroyed, and you would then receive a new one. So in the extreme case of all of them being PayJoin, at least from the merchant point of view, it's actually an advantage economically. I believe that's a fair statement, although it's a kind of a complicated question. From the point of view of the payer, it doesn't really change anything, because they, as before, will select the amount from their wallet, however many UTXOs that is, and they will receive one change UTXO back, as before. Nothing changes.
Okay, so you're saying that the merchant pays for his input cost?
Oh, you're talking about him actually paying for it. Yeah, that's why you reminded me. Thank you. That's why it's more complicated than just saying, oh, there's no new UTXOs created. There's also the question of who pays the transaction fee, which is completely not obvious, I think. Yeah, because if you put it all onto the payer, the problem is he has to pay more because he has one more UTXO each payment. But if you put it, obviously you're not going to put it all onto the merchant. That's crazy. But I think there might be a balance where it's maybe not 50-50, but like 70-30 or something in. Do you know what I mean? There's some reasonable attribution of costs there. But it's a very good question. Yeah.
So something like Join Market does, part.
Yeah, well, Join Market is kind of non-ideal in this regard because we put it all on the taker, but then that gets offset because the maker, it kind of gets discounted from the maker's receipt of fees. But it's kind of another discussion. I don't want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Udi?
Oh, sorry, you couldn't hear me. I'm sorry, I was muted. So I was trying to give Ryan Mike,
Oh,
can Ryan hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
yep, yep.
Great. Great presentation. I'm curious because this is such a novel format, whether this is the first time you've presented in a venue like this, and generally what you felt the engagement level was, and how easy it was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I anticipated it would be a little bit, as the kids call, scuffed, and it was a little bit, as the kids call, scuffed, because this is the very first time we've done this in this area, in this space. So we've got to pay attention to the microphone issues, the control issues. The issue with, by the way, if you were wondering why I kept scrolling all the time, doing slides in this venue doesn't really work. At least we haven't figured out a good way to do it. So that's definitely going to have to be worked on. First time I've done this. I've been in VR like since late 2018, various apps, VR chat and Beat Saber and all kinds of things, right? So I'm kind of quite familiar and comfortable in VR. And also, I used to be a teacher, so doing presentations is kind of normal to me. But overall, I think it went pretty well. Obviously, when we do this next time, it'll be a little bit better because people will know what the issues are. But overall, I think it was okay. Yeah.
No, I think you did a great job. My question was more, having presented in a variety of venues in the past, big venues, small venues, classrooms, whatever. You can normally get a pretty good read for the room, right? But just when you're making eye contact.
Right.
I wonder if, what, if anything,
Yes,
you
that's
were
a
able
good
to pick
question.
up on during the presentation.
That's a good question, yeah, because I didn't think about that at all at first, which was stupid of me. But as it went on, I realized that was an issue. And people are using emojis, and I want to thank them for that because that actually was helping. It's helpful to see, that's actually quite unique, okay? Because quite apart from the technical issues and like solving the technical issues, like making sure the microphone works, when I made a particular point, I would sometimes see like 20 people, well, not 20, but a few people put up little claps or hearts or whatever. So actually, as a presenter, you get a silent feedback. They don't have to like shout out and interrupt anything, but you get a silent positive feedback on certain points you're making, which I think is quite unique and kind of cool. I didn't even realize that was going to happen. Yeah.
Is it only the presenter that can see that, or I assume everybody else can see that as well, right? Was it just the end?
Can you see emojis now? Can you see emojis now?
I can now. I can't remember if, during the presentation. Yeah.
Yeah, there weren't a huge number, but at certain points there were a few coming up at certain key points. Yeah, that was
I might
really
have been
interesting,
backwards.
Yeah.
Great work. This is a very fascinating experiment.
It's fun, isn't it? It's
obviously,
fun,
yeah, no, it is, and kudos to what you're working on.
Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Next question from Jonathan.
Hey,
Jonathan,
can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay,
Yep.
so I know that there are some centralized services like BlockFi, and I think I heard about Coinbase as well, that they rejected deposits from coins that had been mixed previously. I'm curious if there's any statistics about rejections from centralized centralized custodians going through this process.
Yeah, so I mean, I was mentioning that at the start of the talk about become the privacy wars have, and as for statistics, I think it's a fairly new phenomenon over the last year or two. What I think we're seeing principally now is something like, there are certain addresses that get marked as related to certain criminal events, such as the what's it called, the Plus token scam, and then what's happening is that people are using mixers. By mixers, I mean actual like PayJoin facilities like Samurai, Wasabi, Joy Market, what have you. So they're actually using them, and inevitably, or not inevitably, but in many cases, there will be like connections, even though there are only probabilistic connections between the coins that you own that went through a CoinJoin and other coins that were from one of these scams or criminal events. And because the blockchain analysis software is quite, crude, it's mainly doing what used to be called taint analysis. And it's looking at percentage linkages between coins. And it's in these particular cases, like that Binance Singapore case, somebody's withdrawal got blocked because an earlier transaction they'd done was linked via, I think, Wasabi CoinJoin with the OnePlus token scam. So what does all this weird stuff mean? I just think it means, like I was saying earlier on, that we do need to have kind of steganographic methods, but but I have to say, I do not reject, and in fact, I personally participate in public coin joins, as in coin joins that are obviously coin joins. I will continue to do so, but we all have to bear in mind that this is the world that we live in, and if we want to interact with centralized entities, they are not going to be our friends when it comes to fungibility.
Awesome. Okay, I think we'll take, I guess, 2 more questions. Is it okay, Adam?
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Okay, great. So, there, Gigi. Question next. Sorry, I can't seem to hit your megaphone. I'm sorry. You can try, maybe raise your hand again. Let's see, JCS Face.
Let's try again.
JCS Face? No. Okay. And there, Gigi, one more time. Let's see if it works. No, I'm sorry. I don't know why it won't work with you, there, Gigi. I'm sorry. Oscar.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned like, you know, some level of interactivity for PayJoin, and the fact that Lightning is also interactive. This might be a bit of a forward-thinking, open-ended question, but have you given any thought to, you know, how you could use, you know, share that interactivity? Like, are the people that you're opening and closing channels with, can you somehow leverage that to, you know, just reuse the interactivity?
Yeah, first of all, the answer to your question is no, I haven't thought about it, but I have thought about, and many other people have thought about, the general idea that coin joins could be integrated with Lightning channel opens. That generally seems to make a lot of sense. One reason it makes sense is, as you say, that you can share the interactivity burden between the two protocols. But the other reason it makes sense is that because Lightning channel opens, almost by definition, not quite, are quite insensitive to amounts. So if I want to open a channel with you, I don't really care whether it's 1.5 million Satoshi or 1.7 million Satoshi. And one of the pain points with CoinJoin generally is wanting to have fixed output amounts. And then again, this is confusing. I'm talking specifically about the non-PayJoin CoinJoin, where people try to create equal-sized outputs. Combining PayJoin with Lightning channel open, off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it makes sense, because then you're combining a payment with a Lightning channel open. Maybe it does, actually. Yeah, maybe it does. Maybe you're making a payment and your change either feeds into a Lightning channel or creates. It's complicated. There's many possibilities. It's a good thought. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Oscar. And let's try the last one. Parallel Police. Let's see if you can speak now. I think they cannot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try someone else. So we have Ben the Car. Ben the Car.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, I was curious your thoughts on like implementing this with pay to endpoint, where like you have like a taproot address that you use as the same as a Tor address, and then use your like interactive protocol over that. Is that something you've considered, and or anything working on that yet?
Yeah, so this is the level of talk that I'm sure a couple of people came here for, which I wasn't going to give because I knew it was a very general audience. But yeah, the idea specifically with Taproot having exposed public key means you can arrange for sort of on the fly ephemeral encryption with the counterparty, which is kind of cool. In terms of protocols, there is a BIP 79, which I kind of have a couple of issues with. But obviously it describes the general principle pretty well, but that doesn't even have like PSBT, and it certainly doesn't address Taproot, if I remember correctly. So you're talking about how we're going to make this work in the future. I don't have any ideas about it, but maybe we can talk offline about it. Pretty cool. Yeah, cool.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that with that we'll finish the questions. But thanks a lot to Adam for this. This was amazing. And thank you, all of you, for coming. And I think what we're going to do now, we'll do at maximum 5 more minutes of staying here so you can, ask Adam or ask each other whatever questions you'd like. And then I'll make an announcement that we'll move over to VR chat for those of you who want to go there. It's a lot of fun. That's the app we used for the last 2 meetups. And yeah, I'm also going to end the video stream right here. So for everyone watching the live stream, that's going to end now. So thank you. And you should join the VR Bitcoin channel on Telegram for the next event. You should see a link